it's only small. Some cities it's more extreme, but cities have recognising there's a limit to how far out you can go, and they're coming back in. In Australia, these are the areas of growth: the inner Canberra, inner Sydney, inner Brisbane, inner Melbourne, inner Perth. So back into the city where the opportunities to use public transport are better, where distances are shorter. And that's certainly one of the reasons that's driving peak car use. Now, our graph that we produced in 1989, we've added to ever since. Every city in the world fits on this graph somehow. Their density and their car use or fuel use per person. So this is Atlanta, Houston, Denver, and so on, down through the American cities. The Australian cities are here, European cities are further down here, and the Asian cities are out here. Now, you don't have to go out to Hong Kong densities to get massive reductions in car use. You can start coming down that very quickly by just very small increases in density around the 35 to 50 persons per hectare mark. You have a very big shift. It's an exponential decline sets in. Again, the transport modelers think it's 1-to-1, but it's not. It's an exponential decline. The second factor is the car culture that's changing. That particularly the young and the wealthy. Amongst the young, the red is the most recent car use, and the people in their teens, their 20s, their 30s, the 40s, the 50s, have all been reducing their car use. Then you get down into the baby boomers. Us silver hairs, I'm afraid, are driving more. But there's fewer and fewer of us. In fact, we're driving to our own funerals. And it's... but we were born with the car. You know, this was how we found our freedom and our networks, our relationships, our friendships. They're all based around the car. So it's very hard for us to give it up. You've got to think of us. My children don't drive hardly at all, and they do find it difficult when I drive unnecessarily. I don't do it much, but the reality is the young and virtually everyone these days are using social media devices, computers and so on, as well as, of course, the mobile phone, to make connections. So freedom and attachments and networks are easier to keep up while you're sitting on a train. I do see the odd people texting and so on whilst driving, but in our country you go to jail if you do that, and it is very dangerous. So it is a lot easier if you're in public transport. Brightline, by the way, has said they've recognised this. You'll have the very best Wi-Fi. You'll be able to work and do everything you need to whilst being all aboard. And all around the world this is the case. But the key thing is that there is a transition occurring culturally, because the data is extraordinary. From 2001 to 2009, car use by 16 to 34-year-olds decreased from 10,300 miles to 7,900 miles. That's dramatic. And they are using other modes, but mostly they're moving to areas where you don't need cars. Do you want to shut the window up there? Thanks. The third factor is travel time benefits moving away from cars. But cities are built around how far you can go in an hour a day. And an hour a day, just quickly, is the travel time budget. It's called the Marchetti constant. Every city in the world is the same, about an average of an hour a day, a bit over. That means a half-hour journey to work. And if you go over that, the whole road rage thing starts to collect, and people get very angry if they have to, on average, do a lot more than that. So it's a fixed limit in our cities. It's been the case for hundreds of years. So we could walk across the cities in ancient times, but you wouldn't walk more than an hour a day. And then in trams and trains you wouldn't walk more than an hour a day, and now in cars. But we've hit the wall. People are driving further than that in order to have a house that they can buy. And so the traffic's building and it's getting worse and worse. So we collect data that shows this. These are all the ratio of the speed of public transport to the speed of cars. If it's just public transport, it's always less than 1. But if you just look at urban rail, then it's very close to 1 in the American cities. In the Australian cities, we crossed 1 in 1995. It's been going up. All the European, the Asian cities, it's been over 1 for some time. If you go to Beijing, for example, and try to drive, you would not get very far in an hour. But you can take the metro and very quickly get around the city. So urban rail is being discovered as a way to beat the traffic. And that's what's happening with Brightline and with all the rail building that's happening around the world. So just quickly, that shows that again, the global average has gone up and is over 1. And this means that rail is getting a market again. So the building of public transport is essentially going up in every part of the world. In China, 82 Chinese cities are building metros. The Indian government is now committed to building 51 metros. They've got it in 2 or 3 only at this stage, but they're building them everywhere. Any city over 1 million. The Middle Eastern cities are all building urban rail. And this is Beijing. This is bicycling. Went down dramatically. This was the increase in car use. The red line is in Beijing, the increase in the metro, to the point where car use has hit the wall and is going down. The reality is you couldn't fit no car in the cities. You know, they were just so crowded, very dense, with small numbers of cars, but too much. And Beijing now has 9 million people a day using their transit system. In America and in Australia, I'd have to say, light rail is the big winner in this period. Light rail is fitting into our cities in ways that enables us to make this quick transference. And it is there is a genuine market, I think, for light rail. But it's interesting that bus usage has actually gone down in this period. It's not hard to explain why. You can see that the capital cost for light rail is per passenger kilometre is very competitive, and the operating cost as well is very competitive. My story is based around this, that this is our Central City Rail Station, which warms my heart when I see it now, because the whole system was closed down. This is me in 1979, the hippie young lecturer and local government councillor who'd been elected, and they closed our railway down, and I thought there's something very wrong with this. And I've been a transport planner ever since. But essentially, this is my family and students who became the Friends of the Railways. And we won that campaign. We were able to bring the railway back, and then to win the politics of it, which is rolling out roads everywhere. This is our Minister for Transport, who John has met, managing to win the political battles. Maybe you haven't seen that film, it's from the 1920s. And we now have a system that goes deep out into the car-based suburbs. It's a long, thin city, you know about long thin cities, and it enables these corridors to be serviced in ways that weren't predicted by the transport planners, but the politics was very strongly in our favour. So every election over the last 15, 20 years, we have won an urban rail project, and we've gone from 7 million passengers a year to 70 million passengers a year. This is the Southern Railway, which carries the equivalent of 8 lanes of traffic, and 1 lane of a freeway costs about 50 million to build. This costs 17 to 22 million per kilometre. So it's very cost effective. And when people said, oh, you won't get people out of their cars, they were wrong. People do. And now we're getting land development around the stations in some of the station areas. The next phase for us is light rail, and hopefully we'll win that. We're still in the process of winning it. The fourth area is about the knowledge economy. What is it that's driving our economy these days? And increasingly it's about the need for face-to-face contact in walkable areas. Spatial efficiency is important, and rail systems, bikes, walking, they're very spatially efficient. So it enables our cities to have this face-to-face contact. So the top 6 most walkable cities in the US have 38% higher GDP. That's a powerful statistic. 70% of the knowledge economy workers in Boston live in walkable areas. People who need to meet, to plan projects for the creativity and innovation that comes from getting different people together. You can follow up on the internet, but you don't have that creative ability unless you come together face to face. So face-to-face contact is a cities thing. It's not a suburbs thing. It's not a shopping centre thing. And Ed Glazer and Richard Florida have been talking about this for a long time, and they were right. Density matters. Density relates to not just car use, but the labour productivity, the ability to create wealth. So this is why cities are now competing on the basis of their walkability. This is New York, this is now Broadway, which used to be filled with cars and is now significantly improved. It's very intensively used, but by people walking now. In central London, the traffic fell by 19% in that 9-year period. And the Times said it's cafe culture replacing car culture. You know Jan Gell, he's been working in West Palm Beach, and he's been in many cities around the world. The first English-speaking city he worked in was Perth in 1992, so we got to know each other, and I've been working with him ever since. We have written a book, People's Cities, The Life and Legacy of Jan Gell. And that's another Island Press book that's coming out early next year. It's a great story because it shows how a person very committed to this idea of walkability. When he first started, it just seemed a bit crazy. It's now every city is trying to get more walkable. And it's a sign that we're winning. And the data on this is very powerful. That many cars can fit into 3 buses or 1 light rail, and you create all that space, huge amounts of space that is very good for the economy, very good for saving greenhouse gases and all of the good things. So if you want to get 1 lane of people per hour, you can fit 2,500 down 1 freeway lane, 5,000 in a busway, 10 to 20 in a light rail, or 50,000 in a train. That's 25 times more, no, 20 times more efficient. People ask me about autonomous vehicles. There's your autonomous vehicles. They're all lined up, they're a metre apart, and they're all driving through the city. But they're still stuffing up the city, and they're all looking for passengers. So if there's any people walking around, they're all stopped, because they don't know where to go. They're all being affected by their senses. there are places for autonomous vehicles, particularly in last mile, first mile picking up in the suburbs. But to let them loose in our cities is just continuing the same problem we've had and that we're trying to overcome. So essentially, we built our cities to start with as walking cities. Then we followed the tram lines and then the train lines. And eventually the car-based cities emerged. What we've called this the theory of urban fabrics, and we go into why we should respect each of these fabrics and try to regenerate them in the future city. And this economy that we're seeing emerge now is favouring the old walking city and the transit city. People want to live near either a city centre or a transit corridor so that they can save time and so that they can be near jobs and have that human face-to-face interaction. So the 21st century is reducing both oil as well as coal, and it's being reduced through car dependence. Now we will get more and more electric vehicles as a way of phasing out oil as well. But you don't want to just do electric vehicles because our cities wouldn't be efficient enough. We actually have many issues about the car dependence that are more than about coal and oil. So the cities that are decoupling, this is wealth, this is car use, the cities that are decoupling the most are the ones that have got the best urban rail, and this is Washington DC, this is Portland. So West Palm Beach and the whole Florida corridor along the coast needs to become one of these cities that is increasing wealth and decreasing car use. And I think it's pretty obvious that there is a demand for it. It's politically going to work. The future is that there'll be less and less car use per unit of GDP, and this is officially recognised now in the planning systems of the US government. You can now get light rail without a catenary because they also have the lithium-ion batteries, which are part of this new generation of cheap ways of storing solar energy. It's how lithium-ion batteries are in our phones and our computers. They're now in our households. They're being rapidly bought to go with solar systems. They can go in these trains. They can recharge at stations. It's a very quick inductive process. So this idea of solar transit, it can really happen. And it ought to be part of this long-term future that you're building into this area, where you have two heavy rail systems coming down the coast and the need for light rail to go across, joining together the areas that you have that are needing to link across to those fast rail systems. So this is the big question. Will non-solar, coal-based homes that are car-dependent and oil-dependent on the urban fringe become stranded assets in the emerging city of the future? I'd say they will. And we need to create cities that don't have these stranded assets. So, how do you fund it? I always get asked this, and let me just finish with this idea. Funding this process is possible. It is necessary to see now that the old way, we cannot keep doing it, and we need to see that this new way has a market. It has a demand to it. Our Prime Minister is an urban rail enthusiast. The previous one was the exact opposite. He stopped any funding of urban rail, and he got thrown out after 18 months, fortunately. It happens to some of these extreme people who think that the world needs to go back rather than forward. Anyway, this guy is totally into exploring new ways of funding these urban rail and transit-oriented developments, similar to what Portland did with the Pearl District, the private light rail that was built for that. So this is my new thing, the entrepreneur rail model. This is what we've been talking about with the TOD working group today, and I've talked about it in several other cities. It is a simple enough idea that previously we used to plan transit by estimating the numbers based on where the buses are going essentially, and where transport planners, modellers suggest we'll get enough people, and then you try to get the money from government, and then at the end of that you might add on some land use if you're lucky. And if you go along the train lines that you've now got, there's not a lot of development around those stations. They're not, you don't yet have the transit-oriented developments. Same thing happened in Australia. The new way is to say, let's see what land development potential there is, the redevelopment potential. Let's find out where that is, and then try and string it together into a transit system that can be paid for out of the land development. And then you estimate the transit numbers. But don't get the transit planners in until after you've worked that out, or do it together with them, but don't let them run the whole thing, because they will get the area of the line of least resistance, and you'll end up going through areas where you don't need a train line. It's just the quickest way to get from A to B. So the key thing is you don't define the route. If you want to get some light rail now going across in various ways, don't define it too closely. Call for expressions of interest from the private sector. Get the people who understand land development to tell you where the best sites are that need to be unlocked by the light rail. They won't happen unless the light rail's built, they know that, but they'll tell you where it will happen, and you get them to form a consortium that can build, own, operate and finance the whole scheme. Government can come in to manage the procurement process, to develop the linkages to the rest of the transit system, and to do land assembly work. This is what they do in Japan. The whole of the Japanese railway system is private. Every new line they build is privately done through land development around stations. So it's a highly efficient system, and it works. The results are, if you do this, it unlocks those lazy land assets, the ones that are sitting there and you know, they're zoned to be better but nothing happens. It integrates the land use and transit because both of them depend on the finance. It changes the politics of redevelopment. Instead of having NIMBY reactions to density, they want the density because it's going to be right there. It's not going to be spread vaguely through people's backyards. It's actually going to be right there, and it's going to enable us to have a new rail line. And it enables the private sector to get involved in the whole process from the start. You're not just added on. And in fact, that's the way cities have been built through history. The private sector builds cities. Florida was built by a rail entrepreneur. Most cities, you can go back in history and see the trams and the trains were built as land development exercises. We then lost that art because the trams and the trains became less and less competitive as the cars took over. Now the cars are becoming less competitive because there's so many of them that it's filled the space and they're very inefficient. If we're going to rediscover rail again, we've got to go back to seeing that it is a market. So every city we come across wants this kind of structure to it, of some kind. Polycentric, lots of centres linked together with quality rail that can go around and in. You can squash that into a long line if you want and have the Florida system. And it is important to see that we can solve multiple problems by bringing this together around the new urban rail options. So this is the future as far as I can see. We are going to increase our wealth. CO2 is going to keep going down as oil and coal and gas get phased out and renewables takes over. We're going to be able to build our solar systems and our solar transit and reduce our global impact 80% by 2050. It's entirely possible to see because the first stages are now being unveiled before us. Thanks very much. You can yell out the questions.
Can we?
We'll close the window.
I think we can all hear each other.
Yeah, we can hear.
Okay.
So let's just kind of open this up for Q&A. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
You were talking about the beginning of your, I'd say your journey in birth with the political turmoil that went around closing trade. Can you go a little bit into depth there and describe how did you overcome that? Why was there such a, thank you. Could you go a little bit into depth about the closing of the rail and why that this was unimportant to many other people, but you were able to make it an important factor of your efforts there?
Yeah, I was an elected local government councillor and a young lecturer who'd been studying cities and was trying to show how we could become more sustainable, and suddenly the railway got closed. And I couldn't work out why. It did seem silly, and I started saying that publicly and found that everybody agreed with me. And so we started a movement. I hadn't done that before. But we had about 12 people who ran this movement and we got mass support. We actually made a record on saving the Fremantle Railway, some to Chattanooga, Choo-Choo. And we had mass events and we started getting huge media attention. So it became a political process, and so when the next election was held, it was a major issue, and the government that was trying to say it's the right thing to do, to close it down, you never need rail in the future, were thrown out, and the opposition that was brought in said they'd bring it back. Won. Now, later I discovered from the planner who was responsible for convincing the government that they should close the railway down. He got a very eager group of people from within the transport. The Director General of Transport had been appointed, who previously worked for the Shell Oil Company, and he didn't really see too much of a problem about getting rid of electric rail. But it wasn't that simple. The real reason was that they needed to join together the SAS military base with the naval base, and the only way to go through that was with a freeway, and they had to close down the railway to build this freeway. Why did they need to connect those two bases? In order to get tanks